The organisation I work for is SolarPower Europe. We are the European Industry Association for the solar PV industry. We represent about 200 businesses in the solar PV sector active in the European market. Our twin aims are both to create a good policy environment for solar PV to thrive in Europe and make business happen and bring the industry together to set standards, exchange best practices and make business happen. So we are not publicly funded. We are a not-for-profit trade body who represents the industry, and we are the voice of the industry at European level with regards to the institutions here in Brussels, such as the European Commission, the Parliament and the Council. So our relationship, first and foremost, is about providing evidence and providing information and increasing the understanding within the policy-making community of what our technology needs in order to be able to deploy, how we deploy, and how we go about building new projects. We very much are advocates for our technology as well. We are lobbyists, and so our job is also to look at current and proposed legislation and technical regulation in detail to try and understand how this would impact the solar sector, and to try and make recommendations to both civil servants in, say, the European Commission and elected representatives in the European Parliament as to how that could be improved, drawing on the expertise and the knowledge we have of how solar works in practice, basically.
Okay.
Absolutely. So I have quite a lot of experience from this, particularly from the UK, from the United Kingdom, from when I worked at the national level solar association. And there, yes, there were a lot of instances where a ground-mounted solar farm was being proposed, and where there were some in the local community that were opposed to this. And broadly speaking, I would say this became more and more the case as solar deployed more and more between 2010 and 2015-16. In terms of why, I think first of all there are a number of myths that and misunderstandings that often occur with regards to solar PV systems. For example, people often worry that maybe the PV installation will create an electromagnetic field that will be damaging in terms of health impacts. That is absolutely not the case. PV produces DC. It is not like huge electricity transmission lines that you see across the countryside. Other myths might be that that the land around the PV installation will be lost to agricultural output. That too is not true. In the UK, for example, many solar farms have sheep that are grazed on the land after the solar farm is built, which means that the land still continues to have agricultural productivity. So I think first things first is always to bust some of those myths and to raise understanding of what this actually means. And then there are in some countries often people who don't like the visual impact of the installation, and there's a lot that can be done to consult with the local population to understand, where are the local footpaths, that kind of thing, and to be able to site the PV installation in such a way that it doesn't have has a minimum visual impact on the landscape. But all of that to say that any large-scale renewable installation, any large-scale solar installation, by law goes through a very in-depth consultation process with the local community, even from when the company is just starting to design the system, just starting the project. The local community always have the opportunity to come to several meetings to give their feedback, give some advice, say what they like and what they don't like about the project. Often the community also gets a what's called a community benefit. For example, often the company developing the solar farm will go and pay for solar panels to also be installed on the local village hall, the local library, something like that. Or the local people might actually get a reduction on their electricity bills as well, so that the value that is being generated remains in the local community. And if it's done properly, of course it's not always done properly, but if it's done properly, that consultation process is very effective, and people have an opportunity to have their voice heard.
Okay.
I think across the whole of Europe now there's a real awareness of the threat of climate change and of the need to act to mitigate that. And everyone understands that renewable energy is one of the leading ways to do that. What often is missing is a connection between that overarching concern around climate change and a sort of an understanding of what is needed to do that and what that means in terms of renewable installations. And what used to surprise me often is that people used to, in my experience in the UK, dealing with those who were perhaps not accepting of solar installations, that their arguments against a solar installation was protecting the natural environment. When if you think about it for a second, if you really want to protect the natural environment, climate change is the number one threat. So I think the debate around energy, around renewables, is already up there at the top of the political agenda. Yeah, so the Commission has put forward a proposal which includes a target of at least 27% renewable electricity by 2030 on average across the EU. Frankly, this is pitiful. It is nowhere near enough, and we at SolarPower Europe are advocating that this should be increased to 35%. Not only that, but a big change between the proposals that came out late last year and the current system is that at the moment we have an EU level target of 20% renewables by 2020 and nationally binding targets at country level. So every country has a certain percentage of renewables that it has to meet by 2020, otherwise it will be taken to court and pay fines. For the UK, for example, it was 15%. Some it was higher, some it was lower. It depends a bit on what is the potential for renewables in that country, how much have they already installed back when the last directive was negotiated in 2008, and what also is the economic conditions in that country. In this new system going towards 2030, the EU governments decided, no, we don't want any national binding targets anymore. We'll just have an EU binding target, and we'll just no particular mechanism on how to get there, which of course that's what they want. They want as little obligation to be put on them as possible. But the fact is that doesn't work. If you don't, we can't just say the four of us around this table will somehow come up with €100, but we're not going to say how much each person is going to contribute. We're just going to magically make sure that we all somehow put €100 on the table. You need to have nationally defined contributions. The political, as I referred to slightly earlier, the political climate in terms of renewables and climate change changed a lot from 2007 to 2014. And the big thing that changed was the economic recession, which meant that there was a reprioritization within the public's mind and within governments' minds of different priorities. I know for a fact that the UK lobbied very heavily to not have any renewables target at all, and to only have a CO2 target, because of course there isn't just the renewables target, there's also a carbon target and also an energy efficiency target. Thanks to pressure from certain member states like Germany, we retained a EU-wide renewables target, a binding renewables target, so it is binding, but we lost the national targets.